This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. A populist uprising across China has challenged the China Communist Party for the first time since the Tiananmen Square massacre. Fed up with draconian COVID lockdown policies, Chinese citizens took to the streets in recent days to demand the end of the CCP's rulership over the country. Citizens also demanded the resignation of President Xi. It started with a fire in an apartment building that the communist police had locked, including the people inside. Let's look at a headline from the Financial Times. This fire killed 10 people. The people were trapped inside the building. Similar to what happened in China in 2020,
right?
When they would lock people inside the buildings, and we wondered, is this real? Are the Chinese police actually locking apartment buildings with people in them and not letting them out? And apparently they continued to do it, and so the building was ablaze. 10 people died. They couldn't get out. But the China Communist Party don't care. 10 people? They don't care about 10 people.
Out of 1.4 billion?
Right. They don't care. Not at all. But this is a very serious uprising in China. And the Straits Times in Singapore said China cracks down on protesters calling for an end to harsh COVID-19 measures. This is today's headline. So the communist police retaliated today. They began rounding up protesters.
Right.
Of course, they have surveillance cameras, facial recognition software.
600 million cameras around the country.
600 million cameras, and drones.
Right.
And so they know who were the people in the streets. They know who the people were who were calling for the end of the Communist Party. So they started rounding them up today.
Has it surprised you that it's taken this long for the police to respond? I mean, really, protests started several weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It started, of course, with the Foxconn factory, the iPhone factory, and been slowly building up. Has it surprised you that you haven't seen a wider crackdown yet?
There could be two reasons. One, the China Communist Party may have been keeping a low profile, hoping they could keep it contained, or there's a possibility that elements of the Chinese police don't want to crack down on their fellow citizens, and they're slow to respond. We don't know yet. What we do know is that there was a heavy presence of police today. This is BBC News. And the police were out in force in Chinese cities today, trying to bring order back in the streets and to frighten the citizens who dared to challenge the China Communist Party. In fact, the police arrested and beat up a reporter for BBC London. And there's video of the arrest and the beating. Right. The British government obviously is not happy. The office of the Prime Minister, number 10 Downing Street, issued a strong condemnation of the way China treated a BBC reporter. We've got a short video of that incident.
Call the consulate now.
We'll beat you to protect you from COVID.
Yes.
So,
Doc, this is much more serious than the Tiananmen Square protests, because Tiananmen Square in 1989 was confined to one place, Tiananmen Square.
Right.
These protests have been in multiple cities at the same time. So something big is happening in China right now. We have some. We've got some video of showing people demanding an end to the lockdowns and the quarantine camps. The China Communist Party has been hauling people out of their homes, the workplace, taking them to COVID quarantine camps. My personal view is that there's probably very little COVID infections spreading in China. This is a cover story to lock up opponents of the China Communist Party. Let's watch this video.
Well, in that video you saw, actually, there were large crowds in Wuhan, of all places, where we speculate that the virus all began at some point or another. And then at the very end there, that last segment of video, what they were chanting is they were going back and forth. They were calling for the Communist Party to resign and for Xi Jinping to step down. And I find that interesting in watching that, Rick, is that the police were just standing there. You know, there's another factor to consider here too, Rick, and the difference between now and Tiananmen Square is the availability of social media. You notice everybody had their phone out. Everybody was recording everything. Everybody was broadcasting, probably a lot of it live.
You know what the China Communist Party did to Twitter? They flooded Twitter with pornography.
Really?
To block the tweets coming out of China.
So they obviously have access to porn. They flooded the Twitter servers with Chinese porn and to keep the news from getting out there. That's the world we live in now, isn't it? So
that's it, Doc. We got a video of the largest quarantine camp in China. 90,000 isolation pods.
It's hard to even comprehend that number. A city of nearly 100,000 made up basically of jail cells, right? And so it's just amazing at the infrastructure that has to be in place for China to be able to construct something like that.
The prefab modular jails to hold 90,000 people. It's a prison. It's a concentration camp.
That's all it is, yes.
You're not going to convince me there are 90,000 people with COVID in that camp. Now, there are 90,000 people who want to be free who are locked up in that camp. That COVID concentration camp, that's the image that should be in the minds of every freedom-loving person. That's what you get when you allow the communists to take control. You eventually end up with concentration camps. Eventually, that's where it goes. And the people of China have said it's enough. Now, you know, I'm very proud of the Chinese people. Encourage them. They're doing what the American people refuse to do.
That's true.
The American people just rolled over and did the lockdowns, did the vaccinations, did the social distancing, did whatever Fauci told them to do.
Right.
Whatever Governor Whitmer and Governor Newsom, Governor Cuomo of New York, whatever they were told to do, the people just did it, and nobody protested, nobody put up any resistance. So it's encouraging to see the Chinese people saying, we've had enough of this stuff.
Right.
There's a breaking point. They've reached it. The sight of people burning to death in a building locked, with the doors locked by the communists.
Yes.
That was it.
And rumors are that the doors were actually welded shut.
Well, that's what, 2 years ago, that's what we were hearing.
Right.
They welded the doors shut. So that tells you the brutality of the Communist Party, that children burned to death in that building, unable to get out. That's what the Communist Party thinks of the people. They're supposed to be the workers' party, but they're not. And that fire showed the Chinese people, this is what they'll do to us. If they'll do it to that group of people, they'll do it in our city too.
Right.
And so thank God that they're standing up. We'll have to see what the next wave of protests will be. I think we've got a few more scenes from the protests in China.
Well, these are actually Chinese workers being marched to quarantine camps in the city where the iPhone factory is.
So all those people have COVID.
Right. That's the story that's being put out by CPP.
Why are they together? Every single one's infected, right?
If that's the story. You should be already quarantined, right? So.
Yes, I don't believe the story. It's a roundup of dissidents.
And you know, if you control the app that tells you whether or not you have COVID, what does that do? That gives you the power to say, hey, you've got COVID. I just made you have COVID.
Of course. Speaking of apps that tell you that you have COVID, of course, China perfected the QR code,
right,
which is now pretty much universal around the world right now. Wait till you see this video of a Chinese police helicopter with a giant QR code hovering over a highway, and motorists in their cars must scan the police QR code from their automobiles. I'm not kidding you. This is what communist tyranny looks like. Let's watch it.
Coming soon to a communist corner of America near you. So,
yes, if the American people don't snap out of their delusion and get off their meds and start acting like real Americans.
So they had to take their phone and scan the QR code and get a pass in order to pass the checkpoint that was up ahead.
Yes.
So that's the restriction of freedom that's there.
So COVID is the cover for total tyranny.
Right.
I mean, Doc, the way this is working, there will never be a day that there's no COVID.
That's right.
There'll never be a day that there's not a virus.
Because the policy is zero COVID. So as long as there's one COVID case, they can use that as complete cover for everything else.
And they can always switch to another virus.
Right.
Like, okay, we wore this one out. We're going to go to another virus. And the next one will be more severe. But the tyrants are learning that there's a limit. You can only push people so far. You can only use force for so long, and then there's resistance. And that's what's happening, Doc. People are resisting. Finally, they're not just resisting the COVID, they're resisting the entire establishment of China.
Right.
They're saying we're done with it.
Yeah, when they're calling for the Communist Party to resign, openly calling for that, there's definitely a change that's taking place in the country.
Yes, I don't think they'll be able to put this back in the bottle. Xi Jinping he's a tyrant. He's bordering on being a madman. And he sees himself now as a life term president, emperor. You know, he really sees himself as an emperor.
Right.
He doesn't see himself as a president, a politician. He's an emperor, like in the old days of the Chinese dynasties. He will crack down on the people, and I'm sure that's what's happening today in China. I'm sure a lot of people have been dragged out of their homes and taken to COVID concentration camps, but that will only make people more angry. It's not going to frighten people. I mean, obviously there's fear involved.
Right.
But when you do it to so many people at one time with such overwhelming force, eventually people say, I have to resist this tyranny. I have to fight for my family. You're going to do this to my children. You're going to do this to my elderly grandmother. You do this to anybody because you're soulless.
Right.
You're heartless. And I think the people will resist. Now, will the Communist Party fall in weeks, months, a year? How long will this last? I don't know. But I think we're watching the end of the China Communist Party.
Or at least a reinvention of it. They've reinvented themselves several times over the past few decades, depending upon the situation, circumstances.
This is the most severe challenge to their power ever since Mao Zedong. Nothing like this has ever happened. So I think you're going to see major changes, and you got economic problems in China.
Right.
You get people not paying their mortgages. They're protesting. They're not paying their mortgages.
Yeah, because they're not getting their houses.
Right. So again, the whole system, we're not getting the full picture of what's going on in China, but China may be imploding. The political, financial system of China may be imploding. And that's a good sign. I'd love to see the China Communist Party disappear. There are two organizations, well, three, I'd like to see disappear off the face of the earth. The Communist Party, Zionism, and Freemasonry.
And not necessarily in that order either. And so,
well, they're all together.
That's right.
It's all one package. But I'd like to see them just disappear and people be free.
Well, I think they're all part of the same three-legged stool. So
they are. They all got the same father. One more COVID story. Wall Street Journal reporting that life insurance payouts have hit a record $100 billion in 2021.
That's right. And so COVID-19 deaths are likely fueling this increase in death benefit payments, but it doesn't say that specifically, because the increase in death payouts is across the board. It's not strictly from COVID.
And the article
people
says
falling off ladders it's happening more often.
Yeah,
so
the article says that there's no evidence that COVID is the leading cause of death. No, the vaccines are the leading cause of the death.
The only marker that they use is that the only time we've ever seen this in the past is in the 1918 pandemic, and so where they had an increase of 41% from year to year. So we haven't even seen that. But wouldn't it have made sense that we would have seen a huge increase the year before as well? I mean, weren't people supposedly dying from COVID the year before too, in 2020?
Right.
So, but we've done stories here in the past, Rick, where deaths are up across the board. Car accidents are up.
Heart attacks,
everything's are up.
strokes.
So
it's vaccine related, and nobody dares say it.
That's it. That's the common factor, isn't it?
Right. So what did I say at the beginning of this year? 2022 will be the year of funerals. And that article proves it. There's a lot more funerals this year. It's the year of death. The funeral business is booming. Casket business is booming.
And one of the trends that they saw in this particular article was that they saw a significant increase in deaths the younger you went down the scale. Okay, so when COVID first hit, it was older people that seemed to be passing away. But in 2021, those numbers started to shift younger.
Yes.
The only commonality, once again, vaccination.
People had heart attacks.
Right. Younger people had heart attacks.
Adult sudden death syndrome. Yeah, right.
When they can't explain something, they just give it some, nomenclature that, that explains it, without giving you any explanation at all.
Look, I can't tell you how many times this year I've read articles. We both scan a lot of news sites. We speed read because we have to go through news sites so quickly looking for key articles, but your eye is catching thousands of articles every week, and we just can't talk about it. But over and over and over, in newspapers in Australia, Great Britain, Europe, United States, Canada, I see
patterns.
I see stories about people dying suddenly in their sleep.
especially younger people. I'm talking people in their 20s and 30s. People's, supposedly at the prime of their life, healthy, active, and then suddenly drop dead.
Story this week, a young cryptocurrency innovator died in his sleep at age 30.
Yes.
Nobody says, probably the vaccine. They're not allowed to say it. It's just, wow, isn't that a shame that somebody only 30 years old died in his sleep? Well, explain it. Why has this suddenly become normal?
Yes, that's the problem. It's become normal. It's become an everyday occurrence. We don't even think about it anymore. Whereas just 2 years ago, we would have said, oh, he was only 30 years old. Who dies, from a heart attack at 30? But now it's like, that's the way it is now. Because, once again,
it's the new normal.
That's right.
Well, the one person who helped make it the new normal is this little creep right here. This is the Fauci elf, and this is not a prototype. Doc, we got in our first shipment today.
That's right.
From the toy manufacturer, the very first shipment of Fauci elves came in today. So this is not a prototype. What I've had out here on the set for a couple of weeks has been the prototype that we had made. But this is the genuine Fauci elf, and this is much more readable right here. I love Wuhan, and his little behind says owned by China. And if you squeeze his hand, I could do it over here closer to my microphone.
Hey, don't hug your mother.
All right, don't hug your mother. A number of things that the Fauci elf says. You can get yourself 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5. One gentleman got 35 of them. Made me very happy. I was glad that you did that. Look, you could do 2 things. You can make some friends laugh on Christmas Day when they open up a package and there's a Fauci elf in their package. It's a gag gift. The other thing you can do is support True News. And, some people, Doc, have said, why? Why are you doing this, Rick? To support True News.
Right.
It's just an elf. It's an elf. That's all. It's just to make people laugh and give you an opportunity to support True News. And so you can go to truenews.com, and at the top of the page, there's a banner that will take you to the order page. Right there it is. And you can order your elves, as many as you want, and we will be shipping them out very, very soon. And I think it's a great little gag gift.
Yes.
And it's well made, and there's nobody in the world has a Fauci elf. In the entire planet, there are no competitors to this, Doc.
No one has made another Fauci elf.
Nobody has made a Fauci elf. He's retiring this month, and this is a way for you to keep Anthony Fauci in your heart forever. And you can think about lockdowns and mask mandates and vaccines and messenger RNA, genetic therapy drugs. You can think about social distancing. Just think about all the things that Fauci brought us.
Yes.
In the last 2 years. So even though he retires, you can have Fauci with you. And always remember how he changed our life.
And he has.
He changed our lives, didn't he? Anyhow, have some fun with it. It's an elf.
Yeah, we still have that video if you want to show it.
Oh, yeah. The little video. Here we go.
Someone needs to grab that little elf and chuck him across the Potomac.
Vaccinate, vaccinate.
There you go.
It's
Get
just an elf.
A Fauci elf. Okay, back to more serious news. The European energy crisis. Winter is here. It's just a few days away officially, but cold weather has already set in Europe. And this article from the Telegraph today in London, the UK National Grid avoids activating emergency blackout plan despite tight energy supply.
Yes,
There's some interesting things in this article, Doc.
Yes, they were actually ready to go ahead and start
today,
do rolling blackouts. And so the National Grid was poised to pay households to cut their power demand tomorrow to avert power cuts as it prepared to activate its winter emergency electricity plan for the first time. Its electricity system operator had warned the market it may need to use its new demand flexibility service, a contingency scheme aimed at reducing household consumption when supply is tight. Now,
Doc, I suspect that Great Britain's new prime minister and his cabinet, I think they got cold feet today.
No pun intended.
Oh yeah, no pun intended. But this emergency plan was to go into effect today. I think they got cold feet. I think they're afraid. They're looking at China.
And the protests there. I hadn't thought about
They're thinking about thousands of people in the streets of London demanding their resignation. Really, seriously, I think that the politicians are watching this and going, oh my gosh, if the people will revolt against the China Communist Party, what are they going to do to us?
Right.
Let's go on with this article.
Well, the plan which the National Grid said it was considering this morning was canceled this afternoon after a scramble to secure enough power to keep the lights on. If it had gone ahead, it would have raised the prospect of thousands being asked to turn off their television when England faces Wales in their crucial final World Cup group game on Tuesday night.
Well, that'd be a lot of suffering.
That's right. Low temperatures and outages on France's nuclear power fleet are set to put pressure on power supplies, according to market experts in NAPSIS. Now, under the DFS scheme, the National Grid would pay households to cut power demand by, for example, stop running the washing machine or dishwasher until the supply crunch has eased. Households which have signed up to the program in advance will get a message asking them to turn off appliances at a certain time in exchange for £3 per kilowatt hour saved. If the £3 is fully passed on by the suppliers to customers, that implies payments of up to £20 for each day when requested by the National Grid. So they were basically paying people to cut back on their energy usage.
Well, I have this feeling that they didn't cancel the plan. They postponed it a week so that the World Cup games could be seen.
I mean, that's kind of obvious, especially from the Telegraph article there. So
it's just like they knew if we turn off the electricity during the World Cup, we're really going to make people mad.
Right.
Let's let the game be played, then turn off the electricity just before Christmas. They'll probably turn it back on for Christmas.
They'll think it's a gift then, right? So, well, that's not the only area that the UK is suffering in when it comes to the energy crunch that's going on. This is also from the Telegraph today. Millions of rural households in the UK are going to be forced to spend a lot of money on heat pumps.
13,000.
Yes, so
sterling pounds. Look at this.
Right. So rural homeowners could be forced to spend £13,000 on controversial heat pumps as net zero rules cause traditional oil heating systems to be banned.
This has nothing to do with Vladimir Putin and Ukraine.
This
has to do with radical green policies.
That's right. So government plans to phase out all oil heating systems as part of its eco drive will cost rural homeowners £11,000 more than if a like-for-like replacement was used, trade bodies have warned. Now, from 2026, households will be banned from replacing liquid petroleum gas or oil boilers with equivalent models and will instead be forced to install expensive heat pumps. And the reason why is because of green energy schemes that are being implemented, not just in the UK, but all across Europe as well. So the cost is being passed on to the guy on the farm who's trying to provide for his family, provide, essential services and food for the general population. Instead, he has to take the hit on the financial component of installing heat pumps, which aren't necessary. They have abundant oil and gas.
Yes, there's no threat to the planet.
Right.
I promise you. I feel certain about it, Doc.
The planet's been around a long time.
If Jesus doesn't come back and we don't have a nuclear war, the planet will still be here 100 years from now, and the sun will be coming up. Everything will be the same, just like it's always been. The climate has changed for thousands of years. The climate has been changing since Noah's flood.
Yes. When
Noah's flood ushered in
true climate change. That's right, because then you had cycles and seed time and harvest, and that all began after the flood. So
But
that's Bible today.
Politicians are using fake science, this, climate change doctrine. It's fake science. They're using it to usher in global communism. They are communist, Doc. I know that sounds so 1950, but it just happens to be the truth.
Well, Rick, I remember back when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, they were scaring us with global cooling. Remember that?
Of course, and overpopulation.
Right. And the planet hasn't cooled off, and there's still plenty of room for plenty of people. Now we have to be scared that it's getting hotter.
Yeah.
It's called the weather. There are cycles to the weather over centuries and over long periods of time,
But
and the elite know that.
I'll tell you what scares me. These politicians starting World War III.
Right.
Now that scares me.
Because what's happening right now in the UK and across Europe is more of policies than the weather. This is an article from Fortune. An energy crisis is grinding European industry to a halt as U.S. and China race ahead, Volkswagen warns. So Europe's energy crisis is leaving the continent's industry at a standstill, and its biggest car manufacturer says competitors are racing ahead as EU governments fail to provide enough support. It says on the international stage, Germany and the European Union are rapidly losing their attractiveness and competitiveness. And that's coming from Thomas Schaefer, brand chief executive officer at German car maker Volkswagen, and he wrote that Monday on a LinkedIn post.
Well, that really adds credence to the concept that the United States deliberately started this war with Russia and Ukraine to take down Europe.
Right. Because from what I'm reading, the lights are on in Moscow today. They're warm in the Red Square. But now you're having trouble keeping the car plants open in Germany, the biggest car plant in Europe. You can't keep it open, and the only winner in it is the United States. That makes you think. So
and you're already seeing European manufacturers are starting to move to the United States.
Well, it would make sense, right? So for them to survive. Schaefer said that Volkswagen and other European car makers risk falling behind competitors in the electric car manufacturing space due to high energy prices, as the crisis puts the whole of European industry at a disadvantage. We are treading water, he wrote. I'm very concerned about the current development regarding investments in the industry's transformation. This needs to be urgently prioritized, unbureaucratically, consistently, and quickly. So you have two factors that are entering into this. Of course, green energy policies that have been implemented in Germany, which are driving industry in a certain direction and moving vehicle manufacturers toward electric vehicles and everything. But then you have the fake war going on in Ukraine, where it's a real war, but with fake consequences.
Did you read Dmitry Medvedev's Telegram post today?
No. What did he say today?
Oh, it's a long one. Maybe we'll bring it out tomorrow. But basically, he's talking about his view of how the United States is taking down the European economy. And he refers to Europe as America's street prostitute.
Wow. He doesn't mince words, does he?
Oh, no. No, it's pretty raw. It's a raw one. But he laid it out and he said, America's doing to Europe what people do to street prostitutes, and Europe is just going to be left hanging out to dry, nothing there. They're wiped out. This is destroying the European industrial base.
And didn't Vladimir Putin warn Macron about that in St. Petersburg? You're going to need protection. And they were all laughing. Remember everybody laughing in the hall there at St. Petersburg? Protection from who? Well, the United States, that's who. It now makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes. And there may be, there may be in a few years, you may see Europe jettison the United States and make an alliance with Russia.
Yes, now you can see it possible.
Just to get their life going again. Because look, this winter, whatever hardships the European people have this winter, it's going to be mild compared to the winter of 23-24.
Right. Remember that we saw forecasts the next 10 winters.
Yes.
So
they were able to stockpile gas while they could still get it this year. And if they ration gas, talking about natural gas, if they ration it and cut electricity and so forth, they'll barely get through the winter of 22-23. But there's no gas after that. You can't refill the tanks in 23. The real hardships start in
next year.
And the pipelines are blown up. Russia has no way to get the gas to Europe. The way that the Americans are playing this game, every time Russia builds a pipeline, the U.S. may blow it up.
Right.
I mean, this could go on for the next 10, 15 years.
Well, we're good at that. We blow up other people's pipelines and shut off ours. So, well, one of the driving force of the industrial base in Europe is Germany. And so when you see stories like we just quoted here, it should give you the shivers. But the next one here, this is from Republic World. The German army is facing severe arms shortages and has ammo only to last 2 days of war, says a top member of parliament.
So if Russia invades Europe, like we're told, NATO says, hey, you got to watch the Russians. They're going to invade Europe any day and conquer the European continent. If that's true, then Germany can fight for 2 days.
That's it. And
so if Russia has 3 days worth of ammo, they win.
That's basically it. Now, that article also says that one of the shortages that they're suffering in addition to ammo is staffing. They're saying between sick leave, parental leave, family leave, at any given time, only 60% of you only have a 60% force active in the military right now, German military. So even with only 2 days of ammo, they only have 60% of the troop force in place at any given time.
Well, you could stretch out your ammo for another day or so, right?
So another story, this is from Germany as well. Once again, you're at the heart of the industrial base of Europe. Germany lacks new ammunition and is dependent on China. Germany's ammunition stocks are secret, but other states do not publish how many shots are in the bunkers either. In the Bundeswehr, however, it should be particularly small. It's speculated that in a potential war, depending on the type of ammunition, the supply would only last a few hours or at most a few days. Now, against the background of the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine and NATO obligations, new ammunition is now to be procured for billions. But the pace of the planned expansion of production also depends on whether China plays along. And now you have the European continent dependent on the Chinese for ammunition in a war.
To fight Russia.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Trying to follow this along.
You got it.
But the enemy is USA. Oilprice.com. Germany warns of rationing this winter if gas storage dips below 40%.
That's right. So it's saying that Germany may have to take drastic measures such as gas rationing if levels of gas and storage drop below 40% by February, according to the German Federal Network Agency, which will enact such measures if necessary. Germany's gas storage sites were 99% full at the start of the heating season and the onset of colder weather back in 1st November. Now, as of November 23rd, Germany's gas storage was 98.95% full. The gas drawdowns are now set to accelerate as winter progresses. Now, if gas storage levels drop to below 40% on February 1st, this would be considered a critical level, Klaus Mueller said. He's the president of the German Federal Network Agency, and said that back on Friday. Now, the situation with Germany's gas supply will be tense if gas storage is between 40 and 55% full by the beginning of February. He was quoted by Reuters as saying, Germany's energy regulator insists that significant gas and energy savings are necessary to avoid a winter of rationing and gas emergency. But Rick, the forecasts are for this to be a cold winter in Europe.
And when he says significant gas savings are necessary, he's talking about voluntary rationing.
Yes.
And he's saying if you don't do it voluntarily, the government is going to do it for you by February.
Right.
So cut back on your use of gas and electricity now, or suffer the consequences in the dead of the winter. Well, Doc, why don't we just get a big old war started somewhere?
That way we have some distraction going on.
And heat. Wars always heat things up. So the Jerusalem Post reporting that Israel and the United States to hold an air drill simulating bombing Iran's nuclear program. Boy, that'll calm down the world, won't
That's
it?
right. So the Israel Air Force this week will hold one of its largest drills in years with the U.S. Air Force simulating offensive strikes against Iran's nuclear program. The drill will take place from Tuesday until Thursday over the Mediterranean Sea in Israel and will include long-range flights such as those that Israeli pilots might need to make in order to reach the Islamic Republic. The exercise will include refuelers as well as fighter jets from both forces. But Rick, no one has an outcry about, bombing Iran or anything like that. I mean, if the Iranians, though, if they were doing drills, simulating attacks on the nuclear facilities in Israel, which don't exist, there would be a tremendous outcry, wouldn't there?
Well, we'll find out, because Iran published a list of targets in Israel that it will strike if there's a war between the two countries.
And what's interesting is they also include proposed nuclear facilities in here. And so under the guise of reporting on reports by Beirut-based Al Mayadeen, a pan-Arabist satellite news channel, media outlets close to Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have published a list of sensitive sites that could be targeted in a future war. Now, the reports listed a number of buildings and sites in Israel in what was clearly intended as a threat. Iran's Tasnim news agency reported this. It said, in this regard, the Al Mayadeen network has published a report on the analysis of Israel's target bank and the sensitive positions of this regime that can be targeted in any war. At the beginning of this report, the general situation of the Zionist regime at the military level and its equipment has been examined. Now, the article included a list of sites in Israel, such as the Knesset, the Prime Minister's office, and the Defense Ministry. But it also included what Tasnim characterized as nuclear sites and facilities. In the list of warehouses and facilities, the report included a Rafael Advanced Defense System site in Haifa, the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, and the Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa. The report also examined airports and military intelligence bases. It mentioned civilian airports such as Ben Gurion Airport and Ramon Airport near Eilat. A list of military bases followed as well. Well, Rick, it shouldn't be surprising that there are targets in Israel that Iran would be looking at. But why is this coming out now, do you think?
Because Israel and the United States plan to bomb
That's right.
Iran.
And they're making it clear, if you make a move like this, here's the list we're going to go through. Mm-hmm. So be prepared. It's not going to be, a one-day event in attacking Iran.
You know, that Ramon Airport at Eilat, Israel, that's across the Red Sea from Aqaba, Jordan.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So that's less than 10 miles away.
Eilat, Israel used to be Aqaba.
That's true. I remember you telling me this.
When all that region was controlled by Jordan. And then when the Zionists took control of it, they renamed that side of the Red Sea. So, but anyhow, there's a military air base there. Oh, let's see. I found an interesting story in a Polish newspaper today and translated it. It is a Polish, this gentleman there on the left, a Polish diplomat, but I think he was a former NATO Deputy Secretary General for Operations.
Yes, Adam Kulberaki, and so.
And it's a couple paragraphs here, but at the end of this segment that we're going to quote, there's a key sentence in here. So we're going to have to go through a number of sentences to get to the last sentence.
Right.
So let's walk through it.
So Kamila Bydrzycka, she had a podcast. Her first podcast on the Patriots for Ukraine was Adam Kulberaki, a diplomat and former NATO Deputy Secretary of General Operations. So obviously someone who has knowledge of the situation. With him, the host of Express Bydrzycka talked about the transfer of the Patriot launcher from Germany to Poland. So,
so the Patriot launchers are built by America.
Right.
And we sold them or gave them to Germany, and then Germany is giving them to Ukraine. So that's the gist of the story.
So the question is, the first question concerned the transfer of Patriot missiles from Germany to Poland. So the question was, could we, as a NATO country, hand over these batteries to Ukraine without consequences? That was asked by the host. And true, there has been a huge confusion about this, but it arose because it was no longer about any Polish security interests, and only PR political confusion resulted. Now, one by one, he explains, the producer of Patriots are Americans. Hence, we've heard voices of some politicians that they will talk about it with Americans. But the owner of these Patriots is Germany. And while the owner of these batteries at the moment is NATO, because Berlin has declared that these Patriots will be part of the alliance's missile defense. So in the arms trade, the principle of the so-called end user certificate applies, and that is the certificate of the last user. Okay, now, if you're following along here, so there's been a transfer Patriot missiles from the U.S. To Germany for use in Poland, and but Germany, operated by NATO.
But Germany put them into the ownership of NATO.
Right. So, in order to limit the possibility of transferring weapons where they should not be transferred, someone who buys a weapon is the end user, and he undertakes not to transfer these weapons further. So, Mr. Kulberaki says, I don't know the agreements between the USA and Germany, but this certificate means that Germany cannot just pass these Patriots on to another country. It would actually require wider arrangements. And now it all depends on the label. After all, various types of weapons, including those from Western countries, are being transferred to Ukraine. That is, NATO countries are transferring weapons to Ukraine. However, if elements of NATO missile defense were to be transported to Ukraine, it cannot be done because it puts the alliance in a situation of war, de facto war with Russia. And so individual countries, basically what he's saying is individual countries have been transferring weapons to Ukraine because they're the end user, they're the owner. But if there are missile batteries, let's say Patriot missile batteries, that are under the control of NATO, even if they're parked in Germany or Poland, whatever, and they get transferred to Ukraine,
now NATO,
suddenly
NATO is the contributor.
That's right.
All right, so he's talking like a lawyer.
Right.
And there's liability here. And that's what this military commander is saying. There's going to be legal liability for NATO if Germany gives these American-built Patriot launchers to Ukraine.
Because Germany doesn't control them anymore. They've been handed over to NATO.
Yes. So that means NATO is the one contributing the Patriots to Ukraine. And what he's saying is, if that happens, then NATO is at war with Russia.
And then you've got a whole new problem on your hands at that point.
Yes. We still haven't made it to Christmas talk.
No, not yet. We've got past Thanksgiving, but
we're in the danger zone right now. As far as my personal concern, you know, I've said this many times over the last 10 years. Very, very nervous at Christmas time at the thought of a war, and I believe the Lord showed my family back around 2010, 11 or 12, series of dreams of a surprise nuclear attack on America. And it was, in all the dreams, it was always Christmas. Okay? And so I've just taken that as the marker. Okay, when this happens, if it happens, it's going to be wintertime at the Christmas season. And so I want to get through this Christmas. I just want to get through it and start working towards next Christmas.
Right.
All right? So, you know, that's a warning from a former NATO commander.
Deputy commander, yes.
Yeah. You guys better be careful what you're doing here with these patriots. Domestically, here in the United States, Elon Musk continues to just wreak havoc in the political landscape. Twitter bans multiple Antifa accounts after threats and attempts to burn down Tesla dealerships.
Right.
Finally, leftists are being deplatformed.
Right, after they've been threatening to do this for years. I mean, Antifa's had free reign to do whatever they wanted to do for years. Antifa and Black Lives Matter. But things are different now at Twitter. This fight is still on, though. This article from Bitcoin, Elon Musk is planning to launch an alternative phone if Apple and Google boot Twitter off their app stores. I can't believe we're actually thinking about this. They're talking about kicking Twitter off the app stores.
Yes, the left can't allow anybody to challenge their domination of free speech, because there is no free speech with the left. They've been controlling it. And how long has it been going on, Doc? For the last 4 years?
Yes.
The deplatforming. Has it been 4 or 5 years?
Easily.
That they've been deep. You know, we were in the first wave of deplatforming. We survived it. A lot of other people did not survive it. The left does not allow anybody to express their views unless it conforms
Matches
with the left. So they don't know what to do with Elon Musk, who's saying, I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm going to let people express their views. And they're going berserk.
Right.
And so Apple and Google, there have been rumors, nothing official, rumors that Google may remove Twitter from the Android app store, and Apple may remove Twitter from its app store. And crazy.
I know.
But so what Elon Musk said was, you know what? I'll just start my own phone.
Right. He actually talked about this several years ago, about doing a Tesla phone. So,
it will be a huge success.
Of course it will.
And you know what else he'll do? He'll go after the 30% tax that Apple and Google put on every transaction. Most of you don't know this, but when you have any app and you do a transaction through the app.
Right. Say you sell a widget.
Yeah, you buy an object, you buy a product, you buy a service through your app. Apple and Google take 30% of the transaction. It is so unfair.
30%.
Yeah. Small businesses can't afford it. Ministries can't afford it. They do it to ministries. They do it to nonprofits.
Right.
They just reach in with their grubby, greedy paws and take 30%. Elon Musk is going to challenge that. He's already publicly talked about it. And I think if he does launch a phone, I wouldn't be surprised that he makes his surcharge 5%. It would be a devastating blow to Apple and Google because they would have to adjust their numbers.
Right.
There'd be a stampede of businesses going to the Tesla phone. The other thing that he's talking about doing, Doc, is releasing all of the internal Twitter communications about Hunter Biden.
Yes, I saw that post today. Then that would just rock the news, wouldn't it?
Well, there could be criminal liability in it if you saw collusion.
Yes, between Twitter and members of the administration.
And other media people. I never expected Elon Musk to be the champion of free speech. This has caught me by surprise. And I know people have different opinions about him. That's everybody you're entitled to an opinion about Elon Musk. I personally believe, and this is going to rock some people's worlds, I personally believe Almighty God is using Elon Musk to attack this far left radical monster that is trying to crush all free speech in this country. I believe God is raising him up to do this. Where did this come from, Doc?
The way I look at it, it's a billionaire wanting to make another $1 billion.
Well, yes, yes. What his motives are different.
Right.
I'm just saying, I believe Almighty God is using him to open up, because the left was crushing the preaching of the gospel.
Yes, that's true.
They're promoting pedophilia, homosexuality. Look at what the left has been pushing on this country. And if you opposed it, you're shut down. Elon Musk is coming along saying, not so fast. We're going to allow people to speak freely again. He also, this is interesting, he tweeted today a photograph of his nightstand in his bedroom.
So some interesting things there. First of all,
Why would you do this, Doc?
Sending a message, but he does this every once in a while. So you have 4 cans of caffeine-free Diet Coke, you have a handgun, you have a memento duplicate of the musket that George Washington carried when he crossed the Delaware.
And a painting of
right.
Washington crossing the Delaware.
Obviously, the handgun is sending a strong message, and but look in the lower left-hand corner there, Rick. What's that thing there? You ever saw that before?
No.
That was on the nightstand as well. And so,
what is it?
Well, this is called a vajra. This is actually in Tibetan Buddhism. It has a bell on one end. It's kind of a wand, to balance out the forces of good and evil, or choices. It says, so on his nightstand, Elon has what's known as a vajra, kind of wand. It's used in esoteric ritual and ceremonial, often in the Vajrayana sect of Buddhism, known for its tantric or sexual practices. Sometimes it's also used for healing people and exorcising demons. The Vajra and the bell are the most important ritual objects in Tibetan Buddhism. They represent the method, the Vajra, and wisdom, the bell, combined to symbolize enlightenment as they embody the union of dualities. And that's, it was just something weird.
He's in the Buddhism also.
So that doesn't mean that God can't use him, of course.
No, and that's difficult for people to understand.
Right. They think that in order for God to use somebody, they necessarily have to be a committed believer. But no, you read in the Old Testament where evil kings were used by God to bring judgment on others, and also bring blessing on others too.
That's right.
And so,
hey, I want to jump down to one more before we close up here. I want to go down to 43. This is New York Post. Creepy Joe Biden roasted for strange selfies. It's over the weekend. Doc, this is one of the weirdest things Joe Biden has ever done.
Right, and social media users roasted Joe Biden over these creepy selfies with kids, where the president is seen lurking in the background of children's selfies with his face up against a window. So President Biden gave kids sitting in the lemon press juice shop on Nantucket an up-close and personal look when he approached the store window and smiled for some photos. And social media posts from the Nantucket Current shows. We've got some video here. Let's watch it and see if it doesn't give you the chills. And this is from the Nantucket Instagram account here, so you get some screenshots here. It's
so creepy.
I know. It just,
weird old man. Hey, I'm just going to tell you exactly the way I see it. There is a pedophile cult in control of the United States of America. In fact, the whole West. The West has been captured by a pedophile cult. Doc, we have a pedophile pervert president. We're being ruled by pedophiles.
It's just hard to imagine, isn't it? And yet, you look at the evidence that's out there, and it's just overwhelming.
Well, let that be the last thought. Think about it. Okay. How did we get into this position? Because as a nation, we forsook God. We turned our backs on God decades ago. Not just last year, decades ago. This country's been moving away from God for decades. We are now at the place that we're ruled by a pedophile cult.
Yes.
Jeffrey Epstein, you could go down the whole list of pedophilia, sexual perversion in this country. They have enormous political power, financial power, and they're in control. Look at what they're doing to the children in schools now with the gender transitioning. These people are perverts. They're demonic perverts. They're just not your old, run-of-the-mill peeping toms and perverts.
No, they're forcing their ideology on children. They're sitting kids in front of drag queens and saying, listen to this story from the drag queen.
Evil and wicked. Evil and wicked. And there needs to be voices in this country on behalf of Jesus Christ that speak with courage and boldness and without compromise and stands up and tells these people, we know who you are and what you are and where you came from, but we have to preach the name of Jesus Christ and the gospel with all of our might. Politics is not going to turn this evil tide away. It's not going to do it, Doc. You've got the perverts in both parties. This has to be dealt with at a spiritual level, and has only the Word of God and the blood of Christ can drive this wickedness out of this country. Thank you for watching True News today. We appreciate your prayers and your support. Doc and I will be back here tomorrow, God willing.
God bless you.